Hello, I'm your host, James, and today on Good Morning Psychology, we will be discussing Maria Montessori. Our special guest, Dr. Turner, will be telling us about her introduction to Maria Montessori and unveiling the woman behind the scientist. Without further ado, I will be introducing our guest, Monet Turner, a doctor of psychological history from the University of Iowa.
Hey, James. Thank you for that kind introduction. It kind of made me feel like I was about to enter a boxing ring. But the only thing we'll be duking out here is the mysterious history of the acclaimed Dr. Montessori.
Glad I could provide that feeling for you. Monet, would you mind doing a quick rundown so folks know what to expect since this is the first show of our surprise guest series?
Sure, not a problem, James. Hey, everybody on Good Morning Psychology. Today, I'll be briefly touching on Maria Montessori's past, as well as her academic pursuits and accomplishments, and then I'll be concluding with some of her futuristic concepts.
So what was your introduction to Dr. Montessori and her work?
Believe it or not, my background with Maria Montessori was not initially through my history courses. Before I decided to return to graduate school and receive my doctorate in the history of psychology, I actually used to work as an assistant teacher in a Montessori school right here in Iowa City.
Oh, wow. How interesting. Did you know of her at all before you took that position since you put in your bio that you lived and breathed psychological history?
Although that is true, at that point in my life, I had no prior knowledge of Maria Montessori and her practices with children, but I soon learned her philosophies very quickly as I began my work in the Montessori school. I taught in a classroom for 2-year-olds and had many opportunities to help in the older classrooms as well. My work there taught me that there are many Montessori schools worldwide, which is amazing.
That is amazing. For those of you, like me, who know nothing about Maria Montessori, what can you tell us about her and her groundbreaking work now that you do have knowledge on the woman behind the science?
Maria was born on August 31st, 1870, in a small village located in central Italy. I'll leave it at that so as not to butcher the village's name. Anyway, she later went on to attend the University of Rome, and she was one of the first women in Italy to do this. It was unheard of for women to work outside of careers such as teaching. Her male colleagues gave her a hard time along this process, but she persisted. She later obtained her degree from the University of Rome in 1896 as one of the first female doctors in Italy. Afterwards, she spoke at the International Congress for Women in Berlin and argued that women should be compensated equally to men.
Whoa, you said 1896? She was a feminist way ahead of her time.
Indeed, she was. Even now, there is still a gender pay gap, but that is neither here nor there. Now back to Maria Montessori. So, Montessori began working in an asylum, which at this time also served inpatient children with mental disabilities. Through this work, she realized these children were desperate for sensorial stimulation and activities that involved their hands, which was also contributing to their mental illness.
Wow, what a groundbreaking finding during that time. Were people even talking about this back then?
No. Again, she was way ahead of her time in that regard. In fact, many of her findings would later be proved by fields such as neurology, decades later. So, as I was alluding to, her work and observations of these children were critical for her development of the Montessori educational philosophy. She thought that children learned best when surrounded by simple objects of various shapes that could be manipulated and combined, and that this was best done in rooms that were specifically designed for small furniture. So instead of kids needing to adapt to this large adult world around them, they could have their own special kid-sized space for learning.
That makes a lot of sense that children would thrive in an environment catered to them and their learning.
Definitely. Montessori had a great philosophy that still prevails to this day worldwide. Actually, by 1934, she became an internationally known advocate of women and children's rights.
That's amazing.
A few years later, from 1939 to about 1946, Maria was living in India where she continued to study and teach. In fact, the bulk of her Indian lectures constituted much of her book, The Absorbent Mind. Her work and observations of children throughout her career led her to promote a truly revolutionary theory of education that addressed most aspects of child development. She identified 3 critical periods in child's development: Of course, the first being from birth to 6 years of age, followed by 7 to 11 years old, and ending with 12 to 18-year-olds. She recognized that at each stage, children needed different things. By 1960, neuroscientists actually were able to support her observations through the discovery of enhanced plasticity in young brains, which was heavily influenced by the child's environment, as well as the profound changes an adolescent's brain goes through until about 18 to 20 years old. You remember how earlier I mentioned that Maria realized that the asylum she was working in was not engaging the children and contributing to their mental illness?
Yes, of course.
Well, she actually came up with this groundbreaking notion that a child's environment is crucial to supporting their neurodevelopment, as well as the promotion of learning and motivation to learn.
That makes total sense. If you are not in an environment conducive to these things, then survival may be the only concern over proper development and learning, let alone motivation to learn.
Exactly. I could geek out about Maria Montessori and her work all day, but we have a podcast time limit to uphold. So I want to share one last major finding from her life's work. She developed the idea of the vital role that fine motor manipulation played on child development. She was even quoted as saying, "The hand is the organ of the brain," in 1949. This went on to also be proven by neurologists in that the size of the motor and sensory cortical regions of the brain, which represent the hand, are larger than the hand itself, which means a lot of neurons are used to control the movement and processing of sensory information.
Wow, she should have gone to school to be a neurologist. Well, if only that existed at the time.
She was truly an incredible woman who did a lot of important work. I'm so lucky that I got to work in a Montessori school to even learn who she was, because I had no idea before then.
Yeah, I'm happy you had that experience too. Well, as we come to the end of our show, what final words would you like to express about Maria Montessori and her legacy?
It's so hard to find words when thinking about this incredible woman. Well, I guess I'd say Maria Montessori was a dedicated and courageous woman who sought after a life that she was discouraged to have from the start. She persisted through much adversity and was able to make so many wonderful contributions to the field and our knowledge of children and their learning. I am honored to be a part of that legacy through my past role as a teacher at a Montessori school and my continued role of an educator about her life and legacy. There are many Montessori schools all over the world. I encourage any people with children to learn about these schools because they are truly groundbreaking in their approach to childhood learning.
Dr. Turner, thank you so much for coming on and sharing this wonderful woman with us.
Thank you, James.
Now tune in next week where we will have another surprise guest on our surprise guest series. I'm your host, James, signing off on Good Morning Psychology.